everyone, and welcome to the Student Academic Support, or SAS in short, interviewing process. My name is Alyssa Lee, and I'm the host of these interviews, interviewing both teachers and students as I receive insightful information pertaining to how our local community perceives the issue of weakening academic support systems within students in Riverside. In today's video, I will be interviewing first grade teacher Mrs. Geiger, as she reveals how she defines academic success, as well as how she positively shifts the minds of her young students. So without further ado, please enjoy today's video.
All right. So just to give a review once again of our project, which is focusing on education, and our primary topic is just having to do with parental involvement in student success. So we're just seeing that a lot of the time that students who are not having necessarily the most sturdy academic foundation are those who just did not receive enough parental or just academic support in general in their younger years of education. Therefore, they just struggle, and you start to see more of that come up and become more prevalent in their older years of education. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions. So I just want to start just how would you describe the parental involvement at your school within your classroom with students? Like, would you say that there's enough, very little? Like, how would you describe that?
I think that it's a very interesting question in light of COVID. I feel like now we look at things in terms of pre-COVID and post-COVID. And I think post-COVID, unfortunately, parental involvement has really declined. It feels as though parents today of younger students, it feels as though they feel that maybe the primary job is just to get them to school. And once they've dropped them off at school, they have done their job. And they pick them up and they've done their job. And I don't want to say that that is across the board for everybody, but it just feels like there is not as much support at home as there used to be. And that could be support in terms of like doing homework. I would say maybe half of my class does homework every week, and that never used to be. Support in terms of less parent involvement, even inside of the classroom, in terms of like volunteers coming in to help. It just feels like school and home is two distinct worlds. At school, they are my responsibility, and then once they're at home, there is no more educational responsibility.
Oh, okay. So I noticed you were talking about like the homework completion being an issue. And do you think you could see that being reflected through the students who have more hands-on parents, like whether that be through like student like teacher like conferences and stuff like that, parent teacher conferences. So how would you describe that?
Um, it seems like the kiddos that are academically successful already, those are the parents that are doing the homework. And those are the parents that are looking through the graded work and emailing questions about how can I help my child with math, or how can I help them become a better reader. Like they're already academically strong. They're academically strong because they have the support at home. And then the students who have more academic gaps or need, those are the kids that receive less support at home, hence the more need, because they're not getting it both at home and at school.
And those students who like are struggling because they're not receiving that, familial support, how do you go about helping those students in the classroom?
Well, so a couple of ways. In class, we have small group time. Primarily, we use that small group time for reading support, and especially like in the first grade classroom, we want them to leave first grade as readers. Research shows that if students are not reading by third grade, that gap becomes increasingly larger and therefore harder to close the gap and get them to be readers. So we primarily help them with small group inside of the classroom. We have some computer-based intervention programs. We have something called Lexia. And what's neat about Lexia is that as students move through the activities, the program will start to dictate, oh, they need more support with short vowels, or, oh, they've mastered their short vowels. Now let's focus on long vowels. So that's another intervention along with small group that we can use in class. When students are struggling, we try to get a hold of their parents even before conference time or before report cards. Like by then it's too late. We try to communicate to them early. Your kiddo is struggling with XYZ, and try to give them like simple tips at home. This is what you could do to support their areas that they're having troubles in.
And do you see like any like results from that? Do you think that parents are, taking on those tips in order to help their students?
I don't have like raw data numbers for you. I like I feel like often that conversation kind of stops in the classroom, that it's a very limited number of parents that will go home and follow through and do the activities that we've suggested or utilize the resources that we've given. It seems like that's kind of few and far between. And I get that. In their defense, we're teachers. We've gone to school for many years. We've had specific instruction. We go to trainings, during the course of the school year. We learned from each other. One of our first grade teachers just introduced something to us called Secret Stories, and we're using another program called from University of Florida Literacy Institute. And so, as teachers, we're given a lot of tools. And so, of course, the support and the academics primarily needs to come from us because we're the ones that are trained to do so. So I understand a parent's hesitancy or inability sometimes to provide a little extra support. So I don't want to feel like I'm finger pointing or blaming, because I understand where that struggle or that disconnect could be coming from. But again, once you give some of those resources and support, it does seem like not very often is it utilized.
Okay. And like for you personally, like with you growing up and like becoming a teacher, going through all that education, how would you say like your parents have impacted that journey for you?
That's funny because as a parent myself now, I think about that a lot. In my household growing up, my parents sat down, they did homework with us. I remember many nights sitting at the dinner table crying over my times tables because I couldn't master them. And in high school, even, my parents were very involved. I remember one time being so excited that in my algebra class, I was getting a B. And I asked my dad for help on some homework assignment. And my dad was very upset because he felt like, how could you be asking me help for this, but you're getting a B in your class? That should be that you're understanding. And obviously your question is indicating that you don't. And so I guess in retrospect, looking back at my home life, yeah, my parents were really involved, even in high school, with my schooling and completing my homework and my grades. And it was just never a question of whether or not you were going to go to college. I just knew that after high school, college was the next step. And so I think about that a lot now as a parent of how do you ingrain that in your kids that, although the other side is I don't think that college is for everyone. And I do think that going to some type of like even a trade program is just equally as important as going to a 4-year college. But again, how do we instill that in our kids that after high school, there's other options for you to go get a rewarding, satisfying, financially beneficial career?
Yeah, of course.
If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, and like and on that topic, like, I think one of our main points is like how are we measuring student success?
Mm.
And with that being said, you mentioned like, not maybe college may not be for everyone. And so like how would you say like with education as a whole, how does that contribute to someone's overall success?
Can you rephrase that question? I'm confused.
Okay, yeah. Just basically like just education as a whole, receiving your education, whether that just be like through high school or continuing with higher education, how do you think that just impacts someone's overall success? Or how would you even like measure that success maybe?
Yeah. Wow. Those are two really deep questions. I think there's different layers to success. I think that, we're given all these tests that we have to give the kids, and, they have to meet these certain criteria to be considered advanced or proficient. And I think that that's a necessary evil. I think on one hand, we need that because we need to see if our curriculum and our teaching is impacting kids and if they're showing growth and mastering skills and standards. But at the same time, I think success, you also have to consider just growth in general. And if I have a student that came into class at the beginning of first grade and didn't know all their alphabet, and at some point they've mastered their alphabet, and maybe at the end of the year they're not considered a proficient reader, but they have a handful of sight words and they're trying to sound out words, like, to me, then that is success. Even though according to the report card or the standardized test, that might be considered a below basic student, to me, you're not looking then at the student who grew over the school year. And I think that is a shame. So that's, I think that success, there's different layers of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was very insightful. I think I'm definitely gaining a different perspective on that standpoint.
And I think it's so unfortunate because as you go on in your schooling career, I don't know that in high school or at college levels, they look at success as some kind of growth. It's, you take the tests, you get the scores, there's the raw data. This is an A, a B, a C, a D, an F, and that's it. And I think that can, then encourage, or not encourage, I think that can discourage, actually. If students are constantly getting, ones, or they're constantly getting D's and F's, I think that can be really discouraging then for them thinking about going into the future of going to college or a trade school. It's almost like, are we conditioning them to feel like a failure because we're not looking at growth and we're not looking at success in other ways?
And like you as a teacher, like how do you go about like motivating students who may be going through that, or just encouraging them, just making sure they're feeling reassured, that I think a lot of the time students are feeling like you were saying, just feeling not so bright anymore just because of those numbers or what they see on the report card. So how do you just like go about reassuring those students?
We just have direct, open, and honest conversations about it. Like I tell them all the time, I wasn't the greatest student. I got bad grades, and that's going to happen. You're not always going to be the best at everything. That we all have unique strengths, and we all have unique gifts and talents, and we all have something to offer. And what is easy for one person might be hard for another, and vice versa. And we always talk about effort and doing your best. And, if you can honestly tell me, Mrs. Geiger, this was my best effort, I did the best that I could, and I really tried, and that effort was only a 1 or a 2, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's just a score on a piece of paper. It's not going to make or break who your character is. And that's another thing that post-COVID we're implementing into our curriculum, is we have a cell curriculum, and we're talking about kids and helping them to grow, not just academically, but also, internally, and talking about using positive words of affirmation and talking about positive thoughts and how to help yourself focus. And we're hoping that by impacting them in that way, that impacts their academics.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Gregor. This was very
welcome.
helpful.
Oh, I hope so.
Very encouraging too with final season coming up.
I hope the teachers, I would hope that, you want to look at the whole student, not just the one or, the things that they turned in and the raw score. And I think that sometimes that's probably easier to do at the elementary school level and harder probably in high school because they have so many more students. But I think that teachers should always consider an individual kid and where they've come from and the growth that they've shown. And, I know that that is hard to measure because you're just using your observations, but I think that's an important part as well.
Mhm. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today.
Well, it was
Thank
so
you so
nice to
much.
see you,
It
Alyssa.
was
You
amazing to
are
see you as
such a
well.
mature young lady. You were so very well spoken and eloquent. I feel like I'm talking